Hello everyone and welcome to this Fintech Power 50 webinar. I'm thrilled to be here today. We have a really great group of guests and a really fantastic discussion coming up all around the world of Paytech. So payments are an everyday facet of life for consumers, businesses and beyond, and the rapid innovation the industry creates is showing no sign of slowing down. In this webinar, we're going to take a look at the disruption of the traditional payments ecosystem and the opportunities fintechs have taken to revolutionize the way people pay. With the help of our fantastic panelists, we're going to break down the factors shaping the payments industry and discover what's next for an industry that's already innovating to the max. So I'm thrilled today to welcome on my very special guests, Mark McCarthy, Chief Commercial Officer at Carney, James Neville, Chief Executive Officer at Jasper, and Debbie Wong, Head of Business Development APAC at BPC Banking Technologies. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you all here.
Good to be here.
So I'm going to give us a little bit of a start by allowing you all to give a quick introduction to yourself and your companies. So James, why don't we start with you?
Hi, so I'm James Neville from Jasper. We were previously Citizens, so we've just gone through a rebrand for those that don't recognise the name. We're a real-time payments provider operating across UK, Europe and soon to be the US. We connect identity and money to reduce fraud and reduce friction on payments and ultimately reduce the cost to merchants. So we're a London-based company, although like everybody else, we've got people all over the globe in various places. But yeah, nice to be here. Nice to meet you both, Mark and Debbie.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, James. Mark, why don't you go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mark McCarthy. I'm from Canny. We are a reconciliation and reporting platform dedicated to the payment industry. So we're born out of fintech. We are for fintechs. Our platform is very versatile and it allows our customers to slice and dice their data and have a better viewpoint of what's actually going on with their financials. And thank you for having me today.
Amazing stuff. And last but not least, Debbie, why don't you give us a bit of an intro?
Hi, I'm Debbie Wong from BPC Banking Technologies. We are a company, we've been around for like 25 plus years with 400 customers globally. We are a digital banking and payment technology companies, enabling financial institutions as well as banks to offer all kind of cool services tailored for consumer as well as business.
Amazing stuff. Well, let's kick it off then, because I'm really excited about the discussion we're going to be having today. Because like I said before, payments are such a vast thing to really get our teeth sunk into. So let's start off by probably a little bit of a high level question. But of course, it's coming to the end of 2023. I think we've got, a month and a half-ish left. So it's time for reviews and predictions and all that good stuff. So why don't we talk about what has characterized the payments industry this year for you? What particular trend or any particular instance of something that has really stood out to you? Mark, I'm going to ask you that one first.
Okay, great, Polly. So I think what stands out for me is the sheer level of innovation that we're seeing this year. We've obviously come out of the COVID years. I think the COVID years has given us pause and reflection, but also has kept us incredibly busy with this vast increase in payment adoption. We really have seen how most consumers are now moving away from cash to cards. We see more card adoption, particularly in smaller businesses. So I think that friction is starting to decrease. For me, this year has been an exciting year here at Canny because we are preparing ourselves for the future. What we foresee going forward is a huge influx of extra high volume of data. And that's kind of what we're optimizing our system to. We're also looking to expand our business into the US. So this year's been a really exciting year in terms of showing progression, even for a small Newcastle-based company, and how we can grow quite quickly and how dynamic this industry truly is.
Amazing. That all sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm glad it's been a good year for you. James, what about you? What has stood out in 2023 for you?
If you'd asked me at the start of the year, I'd have said one thing. At the end of the year, I'd have said another. And by the way, Mark waves from a Middlesbrough lad to a Newcastle lad. It's nice to see some northern businesses going on over here in the world of payments. All tends to be down the south from all I can see. Look, again, coming out of the COVID era, like Mark suggests, there's been a lot of kind of verticalization of kind of POS businesses, kind of in-person businesses. And I think that's been really interesting. That's not really our core market, although that's something we've been touching upon in kind of restaurants and high net worths as well, or high net worth businesses. For us, at the start of the year, I'd have said like stable coins and, central digital bank currencies. But I mean, is that the case now? The start of the year, everybody wanted a stablecoin rail. At the end of the year, with SBF and FTX going pop and all the kind of bad press around that, there's been less appetite for that towards the tail end of the year. I think Web3 was really interesting at the start and the tokenization of kind of everything, but I think that's kind of fallen away a little bit as well. I think they will all come back, by the way. I think next year we'll see a stable digital pound. We'll see a stable digital euro and all those things. But really, the year thematically for me, and actually, it's always like this, it is the speed of payments, conversion and the lack of friction involved in actually moving money. And that goes all the way from kind of what we do with bank-based payments all the way into, cross-border transactions that people are doing in kind of bank-to-bank networks, providing liquidity from one country to another, or using things like Ripple to move money cross borders. So, thematically, it's always about how fast you can make a payment, swift. I kind of gulp at because it doesn't feel particularly swift in the real world. So there's got to be a better solution to moving this stuff around the world. But real-time payments, I think, will be a resounding theme across the world as, the US scales up with now. Canada is implementing RTP with Vocalink. There's PIX in Brazil. The Middle East is going that direction. Asia, also Singapore being a huge adopter of kind of open banking and real-time rails in the next couple of years. So I think, speed will be thematically the thing for me, but that's pervasive over the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've definitely heard the words real-time payments more times than I can count this year, whether at events or like speaking to people like yourself. So absolutely. And Debbie, how about you? What have you seen? What's been the major standout of 2023?
Well, being the business development person, for Asia, I see a lot of continuous effort for payment companies or, financial institutions to reinvent themselves. They all want to claim market share and, also to obtain competitive advantages. We talk about real-time payment. That is really a big topic. We are enjoying exponential growth in this part of the world for both domestic as well as cross-border transactions. And some of the banks have started to look into this as well because they also want to basically, join the bandwagon. They want to launch their own wallet and they want to introduce new value-added services like BNPL, micro lending, for in both the B2B as well as the B2B space. We see a lot of initiative from infrastructure modernizations. A lot of banks are talking to us. They are very keen to get rid of the legacy system and they want to move to private cloud as well as public cloud. And they want to really seriously look at software as a service, which is fantastic, because given that majority of the big banks, they still favor own IT, having everything on-prem. In Asia, a lot of marketplaces and platforms, they've been very successful in the embedded payments, and we see a lot of non-financial institutions moving towards that direction as well. It's all basically working towards a seamless and frictionless checkout experience. In the cross-border space, B2B payment, I think Swift is not so swift as you said. There are a lot of improvements required in B2B cross-border payment, and I think CDBC is probably like a very, very good alternative because you are not subject to the volatility of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you all for answering that one. I guess I really want to take it kind of back a little bit now. I think James and Mark, you both kind of mentioned the COVID years and just generally how things have progressed. But how has Fintech revolutionized the way people pay? What innovations have happened in order to make the payments experience completely different to how it was, say, 5-10 years ago, or however long you want to put on that? Debbie, I'm going to ask you that one first.
The experience definitely have much lesser friction these days. And I want to use like the multi-currency card as an example. We travel, we used to use our debit card or credit card issued by a bank, and, we even queue up to convert cash. But these days, we have the options to get a multi-currency card, and you have the best exchange rate. And I think fintech companies have done a great job in educating consumer or businesses that, look at the fine prints, you can actually save a lot of money. That's one aspect of it. And from the checkout experience, like I'm a consumer and I like a seamless checkout experience, especially for online payment. I like one-click payment. I want merchant to recognize me as a regular customer. I don't want to deal with 3DS, and all these additional checks, put on top of the checkout experience. And in the B2B space, fintech companies is able to offer companies value-adding services like expense management, invoice financing, and this all linked to a payment as well as collections experience.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Debbie. Mark, what do you think about this one? How has fintech revolutionized people paying?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Debbie's sentiment there. As a consumer myself, I love using BNPL. I think it's a fantastic tool for me to spread payments. I mean, I would say 90% of people using it are, don't have credit issues as such. They just want to spread the payments out a bit. And I think, I lived in Australia in 2012, and I already saw the adoption there of Afterpay. And it truly helped businesses. It really did help businesses. There was a department store which was failing, and because of BNPL, they suddenly found a new customer base that they could never have gone after because they were too high end. So suddenly young people were buying merchandise from them. The one thing I would caution, though, I mean, we have a very frictionless world in terms of payments. We can do everything on Apple Pay. The world is starting to adopt less, train tickets and things like that because we can do everything with a card, right? I work a lot with the back end of this whole process, and that is still outdated. That is still very batch driven, very manual, very data quality issue driven. So, from our perspective, there's still a long way to go to really fixing the underlying problems, the real plumbing behind the process. It's great that I can tap my card and the money leaves my account and I go and do whatever I want to do. But the reality is, between the processor and the network and the issuers, the settlement process is still quite broken. So we're looking forward in the next few years to addressing that in a bit more detail in terms of creating new standards and really helping the industry get to that real-time level that we would like it to be at.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the back end. You don't really hear a lot about the plumbing and all this involved in terms of the process. It's always just about, the person actually physically making the payments. That's a really interesting viewpoint. Thank you, Mark. And then James, how about yourself? How has fintech revolutionized the way people pay?
I think we're spoiled in the UK with faster payments and everything else being so ubiquitous. It's when you go to another country in Europe and you want to pay with Apple Pay, it's not as prevalent. You go to the US, it's more difficult as well. I always think that we adopt things very, very quickly in metropolitan areas, and then we forget what it's like outside. And like case in point being, we're out there on the coast of Essex. I went to the Tesco the other day and wanted to pay for some petrol. I didn't have a card. I just had my iPhone, and I couldn't pay with an iPhone. I had to physically put a card in, so I couldn't get petrol. So, in terms of kind of verticalizing the industry, there's still a lot to be done, and that's how we see things working ongoing, is how people are looking at it, in an e-commerce way. People are looking at kind of dealer management systems. We've been looking at what we call the kind of regulated markets, and there's very, very different use cases and very different requirements there. And the more people kind of focus on that, the merrier. I mean, there's a big difference between buying a pair of Nike sneakers with Apple Pay. You're not going to pay with bank, whether that's real time or otherwise, because the dinner's burning downstairs and you've always paid with PayPal, or you've always paid with a card, and it's tokenized and it's ready to go. It's hard to shift people's habits. So, focusing on industries that make sense to you is where we come from. Like, For us, it's always been about connecting identity and money. Somebody mentioned 3DS. 3DS is a pain. Everyone hates it, right? If you knew who that person was before they arrived on the site, you wouldn't have 3DS in the first place. And it's kind of that coming together of GDPR, 3DS, PSD2 is really thematic for us at the moment. I think the way kind of SCA, strong customer authentication, has gone in the UK over the last couple of years is really fascinating as well. It's now coming all the way down to authenticating within the bank. For me, that's the death knell for cards. Why would you pay with a card, then authenticate the bank when you can authenticate with the bank full stop? It makes no sense to put the card in the middle anymore. So, I think it's revolutionizing fast, but we shouldn't forget it's very different in different countries. And Europe's even much slower than the UK. So you have to kind of look at what the pace of change is, and all back to kind of how people adopt.
That's really interesting. Thank you, James. I think what's further interesting that I'd love to get your opinions on is, now that we've seen what revolution has happened, even, that's not a word, what are the opportunities still left for fintechs when it comes to payments? I mean, James, you just spoke about different countries, but what opportunities are still here for fintechs to really capitalize on when it comes to payments? Mark, I'll go to you for that one first.
I think in the future we're going to see a lot more micropayments. We're going to see embedded payments coming up more and more. I think the consumer will actually become a mini business going forward. I mean, I always like to use the example of an electric car. You charge it overnight at a cheaper rate of electricity, and then during the day you could literally plug it back into the network and sell your electricity back into the market. And I see a lot more of those kind of opportunities coming down the line. So the payment process will no longer just be C to B, but also B2C and everything in between. I think it's going to become a real interconnected process. And that's at the beginning I was talking about volumetrics and how we're trying to forecast what the volumes are going to be in the future. We think that they're going to be exponentially greater than they currently are. And coming back to Debbie's point there before about legacy systems, they're just not fit for purpose. They're not fit for purpose when it comes to real-time payments. They're not fit for purpose when it comes to that kind of volume that we anticipate. When we talk about trillions and trillions of transactions per bank per year. I was talking to a bank the other day, and they're forecasting 20 billion transactions a day in the next 2 to 3 years, and that's just mind-blowing. And that's just the next 2 to 3 years. So I think there's still a lot of innovation to be done. I think there's still a lot of work. Again, I come very much from a back office perspective, but there's still a lot of work to be done to be ready, for all of the innovation that's coming down the line.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Mark. Debbie, what do you think on this one?
Okay, if I look at it from a Southeast Asia perspective, I think it's definitely BNPL. I think, Mark, mentioned BNPL. It's really a big thing in this part of the world. Microfinancing in the B2B as well as the B2C space, there's a lot of opportunity in that area. Even though, getting the relevant license to launch the services is the pain to deal with, a lot of regulators started to look into the BNPL model. In Southeast Asia, we hold a large underbanked populations, but digital payments now is making up a big chunk of the market, and it's expected to expand. I guess the only issue here is the ticket size is usually very small, and it's make it kind of hard to monetize whatever program you want to launch, especially when it comes to consumer spending. But that is looking to expand as well. So people are earning more, and they will spend more. That's based on that logic. In my business, we come across with a lot of quite a number of startups with focus on the AI use cases. In of course is fintech industry's focus. They are, but I'm not sure about Europe and America. I haven't seen any applications being launched, but I foresee that it will start to appear by next year, and that is actually one focus BPC Banking Technology is going towards as well. AI.
Fantastic, thank you, Debbie. And then James, over to you. What do you think on this one?
There's a ton of stuff. I mean, Mark mentioned it a second ago. Micropayments, I think, are a really fascinating piece. Like really, kind of anything from 10 pence to a couple of pounds, and the gaming industry is a big one for that. And how does that relate to stable coins and a wallet, and how does the exchange of that actually work? And I think one of the things the kind of card companies have suffered with over the years, particularly when it comes to things with teenagers, children, cards on file, is there's kind of no limits around it. So if anyone's had kids that are 5 or 6 on a fortnight or something like that, and you've got your PayPal or your card bonded to it, and all of a sudden your PayPal bill goes through the roof because they fancy buying a load of skins over Christmas. Luckily, I managed to stop that, but I've had friends that kids have spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds. But that's kind of micropayments, but also delegated authority. So how do I proxy my payment authority to somebody else with a prescribed limit to that? And the card networks have never really had that. The kind of idea behind all this is you tokenize your card and it's an open gate to whatever payments you make from it. And there's never really been any kind of rate limiting or kind of volume limiting around that. I think the way the UK with open banking has moved towards variable recurring payments with kind of limits set around that, I think is a really fantastic initiative, by being able to kind of give your kind of push payment authority to your child for £10 in a month that they can spend on a PlayStation store or something like that. I think that's really interesting as well, and that solves a lot of problems. I think kind of delegated authority for larger payments back to parents or somebody who is actually making the payment for you, rather than, here kid, take my card and whatever. We're not doing signatures anymore, so you just kind of tap it on the POS terminal. That's got to stop as well. And I think just generally, like the move towards faster payments, generally, like Europe being mandating that everything goes SEPA instant as opposed to credit transfer, I think is a really, really bold move that will open up a lot of Europe. And we'll see what FedNow does in the US.
That's really interesting. Thank you, James. I guess moving on then, what are the factors shaping the payments industry, in your opinion? I think obviously we've talked a lot about speed and making things really fast. We've talked a little bit about security as well. But what else is kind of shaping the payments industry as we move along? James, I'll go back to you for that one.
I think I've touched on it a couple of times. It's that kind of seesaw of fraud and friction, really, in all of this. How fast do you make a payment without incurring a lot of fraud or something negative on the other side? I mean, I'm sure Mark's business is really looking at this as kind of percentage of fraud rates and what businesses you can onboard, depending on what the chargeback rate is on cards versus something like payment initiation with push that's relatively going to charge back free. It doesn't mean, by the way, that in the land of open banking there isn't kind of recalls of funds and the like. But I think that's the kind of general trajectory, really. Fraud and friction and reduction of costs generally across the industry base. I think there's a latent appetite to do things outside of the card rails. The idea of a card being tokenized or floating around somewhere else for somebody else to use, I think, is not dying a death, but I think is becoming problematic for a lot of merchants. The speed of settlement is becoming a bit of a problem. People would like to be kind of settled in real time. Other people would like not to be settled in real time. Depends on kind of the appetite of the business. So, I mean, it's the same themes. It just goes deeper and deeper down the kind of rabbit hole as more volume increases.
Amazing. Thank you, James. Mark, what do you think on that one?
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the volume increase, just to follow up there from James, I mean, it will exacerbate and it will exacerbate some of the key issues like chargebacks that James has mentioned there. Things like that will just increase, and there seems to be no real solution to it as yet. I mean, look, we work quite closely with processors and with the networks to ensure that some of these issues can be surmounted, and that we could potentially revolutionize the way in which these processes actually work in the back end. Again, obviously, coming just from a back end perspective, the plumbing there is still quite broken. There are still assumptions made by each party in the relationship. And that leads to friction in the settlement process. And that's kind of what we're trying to overcome. We're trying to bring in data quality measures. We're also trying to bring in better technology. So our product could work more seamlessly with all the integrations that we have. So I think that's kind of where we're heading. Did I freeze?
Yeah, your picture's just frozen a little bit, but hopefully
Okay.
it'll come back. Oh, there we go. You're back now. And then Debbie, over to you. What do you think on that one?
Well, I think pain points are the key drivers that is shaping the payments industry. Whether it's consumer or business focused, the fact is we are dealing with still a lot of pain points, and I think that's an opportunity, for the fintech companies. Quite a number of the fintech have done super well in that perspective. They start with one product and eventually, they expand into other products. But if you look at all the creations of this product, the ultimate goal is always addressing, different kind of pain points. I think James and Mark mentioned, merchant settlement, the delay in merchant settlement. Yeah, those are the areas that needs improvements, and those are the stuff that shape how we come up with new solutions to address a certain pain points. Yeah, and we work very closely. BPC work very closely with mostly fintechs and bank customers. Helping them to basically provide them the tech to create the kind of product that will actually address specific needs. By either the consumer or the merchants.
Fantastic, thank you, Debbie. Moving on to my next question then. Is there such a thing as a perfect payment? I think we've talked a lot about the different innovations that have been happening, how fintech has revolutionized payments, but is there an end goal here? Is there a perfect payment that will bring an end to all this innovation, and that will be it? And I'm really interested in this question. So Mark, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's a hard one to answer. I don't think so. I think we will continue to innovate. I think we will continue to see new technology coming through. I mean, obviously in the conversation we're having today, we were talking about Apple Pay and other payment processors. Wearable payment items, for example, is also going to come through. I mean, I know some companies have rings and things that you could use for smaller payments. So I don't think there'll ever be like a perfect payment. I mean, I think where we are today is we have so many payment methods that, to James' point, we are quite spoilt. It really has allowed the consumer to be very interactive and potentially overspend. I think that's probably the end danger is that the easier it becomes, the more likely it is that we have sort of reactionary kind of purchases. I don't know about everyone else on this call, but I've made some late night purchases that probably didn't need to happen. Right. So I do think, coming back to James' point earlier, we do have to be a bit careful. I also have kids and I've also been through the same process. We just have to be a little bit careful with how we go about our money. Our money is becoming less tangible. It's so digitized that it's an abstract concept of numbers, right? And also, I heard recently as well that some people are a little bit overwhelmed when they go onto certain merchants' websites and find 16 different ways to pay. And they have to select one. I think that there needs to be some consolidation there.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. Debbie, what do you think on this? The perfect payment, a reality?
I think we are far from perfect, and innovations will have to continue because, if you look at consumer payment, checkout. Okay, card payment gives you pretty good experience, it has lesser friction, but there are other alternative payment methods in countries like Indonesia or Africa, in India. Their alternative payment method is full of frictions. If you purchase something online, continuously you're fighting to close all the pop-up, and then you get redirected, and then the screen kind of like shake. That's just, it's not perfect for sure. And if you look at merchant disbursement settlement, I think was it Mark or James? I think both of you did mention, all the frictions the merchants have to deal with for e-commerce transaction, especially. Yeah. on top of chargeback, customer requests for refunds, and then you have to deal with frauds, and then you have to deal with, if it is a cross-border transactions and the amount is of a certain value, then you have the money laundering checks, So yeah, it is full of payments. All these cross-border transactions going through Swift, and it's not Swift, you don't get your payment until like 5 or 6 days later. Sometimes it gets stuck there for even longer because of security or money laundering checks. So yeah, we are far from perfect. There's still a lot of room for innovations.
Fantastic, thank you. And James, what do you think on this one, the perfect payment?
There's never going to be anything that's ubiquitously suited to every use case and every vertical. But what I would say about consumer payments is, why are we making the payments ourselves? I mean, why are we making that informed choice on 16 options at checkout, 4 buy now, pay laters, after clear, Klarna? Why am I not just getting my digital self, my digital AI or whatever you call it? I want that thing, go find the best way to pay for it. And I would expect that to come back and go, you do realise you're spending £1,000 on a Japanese knife right now, and you only have 1,100 in your bank account. Do you really want to do this? And I go, well, no, you really don't want to do this. This is your counsel here. Don't do it. Okay, all right, it's 1 a.m. I like Japanese knives. I won't do that. Maybe I'll do that another time. I think the actual method of making a payment yourself, that double click on an Apple Pay button or go into your bank, it's all nonsense at the end of the day. It's making it easier and easier for you, but why have we even got to make that choice ourselves? And then on kind of the merchant side, merchants have to work with all these different vendors. Carney and Mark's World is bringing all of that together to try and understand kind of what your receivables are and your settlements and so forth. What about rolling reserves? I mean, no one talks about this. So if you've got an acquirer account, you're obliged to put X amount, 20% or 10% as a rolling reserve on your account to cover, chargebacks and all those kind of like fraudulent kind of pieces on cards. What about making something of that? The kind of PSPs, the acquirers are sitting there in a big cash pile. It's a bit like, Starbucks has lots of money left on gift cards. At this point, it's quintessentially a digital bank. It has billions of deposits. The acquirers have lots and lots of money sitting around on rolling reserves. How come you can't take benefit with that on as a merchant? That makes no sense to me either. So there's so much stuff to be done, but the mechanics, and I just think you need to put another layer over the top of it, whether that's kind of digital assistant orchestration or whether that's kind of interest on a rolling reserve. There's bits to be fixed on both sides of the fence.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you, James. And thank you all for indulging me in that slightly evil question. I don't apologise because that was very interesting answers from you all. We are getting towards the end of our webinar now, which is very upsetting because I think we've had some really fantastic discussion from all of you. And I'd like to end probably a little bit cliche, but looking towards the future. As I said, we're getting to the end of the year. It's time for predictions. It's time for all that stuff. So I'd love to know what each of you think will be the big payment trends of 2024. Is it something that we've already seen? Do you think it's going to be something entirely new? I'd love to know your thoughts on this. So Debbie, I'm going to ask you this one first.
I think it's going to be a mixture of new and old. Whatever trend that we see this year is going to continue. Like, for example, more innovations will be introduced through digital wallets. Our fintechs and banks are looking to value add, the digital wallet experience. They're going to slowly introduce like BNPL, short-term lending. Also, if you look at the e-wallet in Asia, most of the operators are actually fintech companies, and banks have started to look into that as well, because it is also a good opportunity for them to offload the burden on processing, micro transactions, and if you have it on a standalone wallet system, it's much more cost efficient from that perspective. I think open banking API integration, allowing users and company access, will continue to grow. Especially in Asia, most of the banks are really, really new to open banking. I know it's super popular in Europe, but especially in the UK, here you can't actually find a bank that offers open banking. Very limited. I think AI related applications will start to appear, maybe as soon as the first quarter. Yeah, basically that's what I see. 2024 ahead.
Amazing, thank you, Debbie. James, what do you think? What are going to be the next big trends?
I think ChatGPT, OpenAI, and all its friends will form a bigger part in becoming, kind of verticalized or even personalized kind of assistants that you can put your wallet with. I think that's coming pretty soon. And Musk has stated his claim for X to be kind of the app for everything. He comes from a payments background. I can see him welding together stablecoin plus a kind of banking license on X, and then OpenAI in the background. I think what was it called? Was it Grok AI that he launched this week?
Yeah.
It's like an AI with a sense of humor based on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. For those that you have read that, it might be quite funny. We'll see how that goes. But it'll probably take the piss out of me for making a payment to somewhere really stupid if I had that as my digital assistant. I think the rise of real-time payments over here in America, I've mentioned before FedNow, Canada with Vocalink, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan becoming emergent in all of that as well. And I think just regulations on stablecoins and how we think about this stuff like that could drive a whole multitude of opportunities. And that's going to be driven by some of the biggest apps, some of the biggest kind of companies in the world, X, Amazon, Apple, who's going to become the bank first, who's going to start pushing out stablecoins. Facebook tried it with Libra and everyone told them to bugger off because we don't trust Facebook with our data, let alone our money, and all kinds of permutations kind of in between. And there's just so much scope for growth and change. But I think Asia and Africa are going to be the biggest growth markets over the coming years, Africa particularly.
Brilliant, thank you, James. And last but not least, Mark, what are your predictions for the coming year?
Well, I think Debbie and James have covered it all, really. I would agree, definitely, stablecoin, it does have a place in our life. It will make a resurgence. I think also, come back to Debbie's point earlier about BNPL 2.0, if you will, I think that's going to come more to the fore. I'm particularly excited in the B2B space and how that will take place. I think there are a lot of businesses out there that really could take advantage of BNPL in the day-to-day finances. And obviously real-time payments and FedNow. I mean, those are clearly things that are very much on my radar as I'm looking to expand the company into the US next year. And obviously these are exactly the kind of areas that we want to be looking at. But yeah, I think James and Debbie just really gave us everything. I don't think there's going to be all too much very new things. I think obviously AI is going to be the new kid on the block, if you will. But I think there's still so much work to be done with some of the existing innovations that we have that just need to be refined. And I think we'll see more of those.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you so much. That does bring us to the end of our webinar now. So to our online audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you've heard, make sure you follow along the conversation on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, using the hashtag FP50Paytech. And you can also head on over to the Fintech Power 50 website to hear more news and insights from us. But James, Mark, Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a really insightful discussion. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.